You don't just get any awards.
Exactly.
It's fancy awards. So thank you, Nancy Bowie Thompson here representing SMUD, and it is my great honor to have a little fireside chat with Gil. So Gil, the journey today was a long one. How did you start in the utility industry, and what pushed you to click apply that first time?
Yeah, well, let me start from the very beginning. I was born in Iowa, Ames, Iowa, where my folks did their grad school. My parents were both professors and researcher in agriculture in the University of the Philippines. And so I was born in Iowa, corn-fed, before I went back to the Philippines. But I did all of my schooling in the Philippines all the way to engineering school. I graduated as a mechanical engineer. And so I already had that bent towards energy. My first job was with a consulting firm, an engineering consulting firm that tested energy efficiency programs in New York City for Con Edison, which is the utility in New York City. And at that time, energy efficiency was done really as a part of the integrated resource plan. It was cheaper to save than to build power plant substations and transmission lines. And utilities were incented and given extra profit or extra money to do those. So I did that, piloted programs in New York City. And then when Con Edison decided to make the program system-wide, they hired me. I was employee number one to do that, their energy efficiency or demand-side management programs. My responsibilities then expanded to other parts of the business in the distribution business. And then 9/11 happened. So I founded one of Con Edison's unregulated subsidiary, Con Edison Solutions, after restructuring in New York. I led that for about 7 years, and then 9/11 happened. I was part in the restoration process. If you recall, 9/11 happened on a Tuesday, and we wanted to make sure that the New York Stock Exchange was going to be open that Monday. So we installed about over 100 megawatts of emergency generators to building downtown Manhattan to make sure that the stock exchange was going to be open. But that event had a profound impact on me. I live 2 miles north in the West Village in Manhattan and can smell the fumes even months after the event. And that gave me a little bit of a bug to want to work in the public sector. It just so happened Mayor Michael Bloomberg was looking for an energy policy advisor to help rebuild New York City after 9/11. So I worked for Mayor Bloomberg for 4.5 years. Probably it's not well known, but he's an electrical engineer.
Do not.
So my job was really easy, It was easy for him to understand what we needed to do. After that, I then went to NYPA. I kind of missed running an operation. So I've been at NYPA now for 11 years and 8 years as its CEO.
Wonderful. So the road to leading a utility is not an easy one. So what are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome during this path to leadership?
Well, leading a utility, you hear the saying that sometimes it's lonely at the top, right? Because you have to build a team, you have to make decisions, and the buck stops with you. It's not everything that you do works, and you have challenges along the way. I've been blessed to have a very supportive governor. Prior to that, Mayor Bloomberg, but Governor Cuomo has been very supportive, our board, and that helps a lot.
You had mentioned 9/11. What are some of the other defining moments that have shaped your career?
I would say Puerto Rico. After the Hurricane Maria, September 20th of 2017, we were the first airplane that landed in Puerto Rico with Governor Cuomo and about 20 NYPA engineers from all over New York State. And we inspected all of their substations, including the sub-islands of Vieques and Culebra, about 360 substations, and just assessed the damage. They were wiped out. 80% of the island was wiped out. And then we marshaled mutual aid utilities from the mainland to Puerto Rico. New York sent 450 line workers, 350 bucket trucks, and we restored the Metro San Juan area, which is 70% of the load of the island, and their central business district and seat of government, so that was a very critical area. We're still there. We're helping them stabilize the grid. Grid is still very fragile, and we're helping them put plans together, which we think is going to be a unique and maybe once in a lifetime opportunity to make sure they rebuild their systems the new way. They build their systems and harden their systems and clean up their systems the new way and not the old way. And so we're fortunate, we're blessed to have that opportunity.
So to expand on that, I mean, you weren't just a utility that sent crews. Where does that passion and that in your soul feeling that you had to be first center, where does that come from?
Well, it so happened that New York has the most number of Puerto Ricans outside Puerto Rico. So to us, Puerto Ricans are part of the New York family. And our governor likes to say, and we all believe it, that if a family member needs help, they don't have to ask. You just go and help. And that's what we did, and that's what we're doing now. And in fact, because of our work there, the U.S. Virgin Islands, WAPA, Water and Power Authority, had also asked our help. So we are now in both Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands trying to help them design the system of the future, along with some other help. Navigant, Jan and his team, we work very closely with Navigant all along, even before, before we got involved in this latest phase, to really help them create the business case to the federal government, because they need federal dollars. Just like, when Sandy hit New York, the Long Island Power Authority, Con Edison, they all needed federal dollars to help rebuild. So we're helping them do that.
Great. So the term is it takes a village. Who are some of the key figures in your life, mentors, who you attribute to helping you get where you are today?
Yeah. Well, I guess aside from my parents, my mom especially, who was who is a big figure in our family and in my life. It just so happened, I think I mentioned to you yesterday, my first 4 bosses were all women in my career. And that had a profound impact in me, in my view of the power of a more diverse leadership and workforce. So, for example, when I joined the New York Power Authority, there were really no female officers, no vice president and above. Now 42% of our officers are women. Our board, we never had a woman on our boards, and we were created in 1931. Wow. So I campaigned very hard to make sure that we have women and people of color on our board, and we've accomplished that. In New York, we believe our country's motto. New York, I think, is the manifestation of our country's motto, E pluribus unum, out of many, one. That's what New York is all about. We were the gateway for all the immigrants, and through Ellis Island and Lady Liberty, that's what New York is all about. And so it was important to me that we have a board and we have an employee workforce that reflects the citizens of New York.
To expand on that, speaking of diversity, you talked about women. So how have you personally tried to identify diverse figures on your executive team and increase the amount of both women and minorities at NYPA?
Well, it requires a focus and it requires work. It took a while. I've been at NYPA now for 11 years, and I had to build from no one to now 42% over 10, 11 years. Okay. And it's a constant effort that we all have to do. And my employees know that it's an important value for us in New York. New York is kind of like a special place, right? It started many of the important social movements of our country, whether it's women's ability to vote in Seneca Falls, the environmental movement at Storm King in the Hudson Valley, the labor movement, the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in Manhattan that started that, marriage equality more recently, it started in New York. So we feel that we have the moral obligation to lead. So for example, in our fight for climate change, our governor and we all believe that we have the moral obligation to lead by example and to actually do things that can be replicated and exported to other jurisdictions, because climate change is not a local issue, it's a global issue. Now, it just so happened that New York, we have probably every citizen of the world is represented in New York. And what better market channel and communication channel to propagate solutions to climate change, but to do it in New York. And lastly, New York is and was the birthplace of electricity. Right? Thomas Edison built the first power plant in Lower Manhattan, and Nikola Tesla invented the transmission of electricity long distance from Niagara Falls to Buffalo. And so it is in our DNA to innovate. It is in our DNA, especially in this power sector. And we feel that we need to be at the tip of the spear.
Thank you. So I've been in the utility business for about 15 years now. And when I met you, I was happy to say I'm, for the first time, met an API leader at the top. So you and I know that it's very difficult. So how do we encourage the next generation of Asian Americans to be more than just the mechanical engineer at the utility, which I thank you all. But how do we get them to get out of being in the cubicle chair to the boardroom chair?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was a lousy engineer, so that's why I went to management, probably the only lousy Asian engineer. API, by the way, stands for Asia Pacific Islander. Right? And yeah, I'm very proud of my heritage as an Asian American. There aren't a lot of us in our sector as leaders. You, maybe Connie Lau, superstar CEO in Hawaiian Electric. And I think it's all about companies, and I think it's happening, especially in the utility sector, where there is a conscious goal of increasing diversity and inclusion, because we all realize that companies are better off when people bring, it's not just race or gender, but it's life experiences, right? When you bring diverse life experiences, you have a better conversation when you make decisions. And so I think it's going to happen naturally. But I'm very proud to be one of them.
Great. So NYPA, as you mentioned, we consider you brethren to Austin Energy and SMUD in Sacramento. You're doing some really cool things. I know you mentioned briefly earlier the digital twin. Yeah. Can you expand on some of the more interesting and innovative programs so that we can all borrow when we go back home?
Yeah, well, NYPA, it's so interesting because it's used by the state as that entity to be the first one to try things out, right? Because we're large, we're financially strong, we have scale. So for example, we are going to be building an EV fast charging network across our highway system. So there will be fast chargers every 50, 75 miles of our highway system in New York, and at our airports and urban hubs, to make sure that we solve permanently this issue of range anxiety. So if you buy a car, an electric car in New York, you don't have to worry about range anxiety. And also we want to make sure that make EV as an easy choice for New Yorkers. We're also working with other utilities and our customers deploying energy storage to really try them out at the transmission level, distribution level, behind the meter, and make them open innovation experiments so that utilities and other stakeholders can learn from those projects, and hopefully then they can help shape the right regulations and the right market rules so that we can foster more of them. We are in the transmission business, so we're building transmission upstate to downstate to bring more renewable from Canada and upstate New York to downstate New York, transmission for offshore wind. There is an RFP process in New York right now where we've partnered with Ørsted. They are building the offshore wind. We're building the transmission to bring offshore wind onto Long Island and New York City. Hopefully they get selected and we get to build that project. And we're doing a lot in terms of distributed solar, utility scale wind, utility scale solar, all across New York. So we produce about 25% of all electricity in New York, 75% from renewable energy, largely right now hydro, but we're going to continue. And at some point, we aspire to only supply renewable energy.
Thank you. So as we close today, you are the thought leader of the year. What are some last pearls of wisdom, little golden nuggets that you'd like to leave with our audience today?
Well, I mentioned before, and it's been on my mind for quite some time now, on how do we really do this and have a just transition, and we get everybody part of this changing energy sector and in responding to climate change. And I think that it could be done. We need to work together. This is a global issue. We need to look at solutions that can be replicated and exported to other jurisdictions. And so as we, I mentioned to you yesterday, there's a little bit of you've heard about the New York REV, right? There's one important aspect in the New York REV that's not talked about a lot, which is this concept of increasing the capacity utilization of the power system. Right? In New York, the power system's load factor or system efficiency is 54% on average on an annual basis, because the system was really built for the hottest days in July and August, that 100 hours. But most of the time, the infrastructure is really barely used. And so when we think about policies and regulations and technology solutions and programs, we're always thinking about how can we increase the capacity utilization of the power infrastructure. Because when we do that, it becomes more capital efficient and therefore affordable, more affordable and accessible to all. So in a way, it's a social equity goal. And it's something that we strive in New York. And so again, as I've said before, let's all work together to figure out how can we bring everybody together in this transition.
Well, thank you. So we have a few minutes left. If anybody would like to pose a question to Gil, we have some runners out. Anybody would like to ask a burning question?
In your earlier talk, you spoke about using design thinking as a means for transformation. I was wondering if you could expand on some examples on
using what?
Design thinking and user research as a way of enabling transformation.
In Silicon Valley, design, you hear the term design thinking, you hear the term lean startup, agile. And those are principles that are usually applied in the tech sector. And I make the case, I made the case that we need to bring those principles in the utility sector as we innovate. And so we are, and usually in creating customer offerings, design thinking is particularly a helpful approach. Co-creating your offerings with your customers and iterating and deploying faster and iterating. So I think it's an important principle and value, and we're doing that at NYPA. A lot of it is you know, it's especially when you're doing digital transformation, it's very appropriate.
One more question in
Yes.
front here. And this will be our last question, unfortunately.
Thank you for speaking today and congratulations. How do you see the social responsibility inclusive for all? There's many ways to go about that. Have you
Yeah.
considered public-private, affordable housing with energy and?
Yeah, so we're still thinking through this, but let me tell you a few of what we're doing at NYPA. We probably are the first utility that has an environmental justice strategy as a utility. And part of that is working directly with our environmental justice communities in New York, from helping on STEM education to doing renewable projects and efficiency projects in the school system in those communities, to helping weave in those learnings into their math and science curriculum. We've also been piloting workforce development. For example, we built a workforce development center. We call it the Clean Energy and Utility of the Future Workforce Development Center in South Buffalo, which is a predominantly a black neighborhood. And it's interesting because most of the industries in Buffalo and Niagara are actually looking for skilled workers in their companies, but you know, and then you have people who don't have the skills but are willing to get the skills. So we just opened that workforce development center, and the programs are designed specifically to meet the demand of the industry in the region. So students directly will have jobs. So I think it's going to take multiple approaches. Utilities deal with it through you know, subsidies or cross customer class subsidies, or weatherization, et cetera, from the federal government. Those are different approaches. One of the things we're going to be doing is do an in-depth survey, maybe benchmarking of what jurisdictions are doing, especially from the grassroots level, under the umbrella of this just transition, and to see whether we could share that across the industry, so that it is addressed by our policymakers, by our regulators, and our community leaders.
Well, thank you. So I wanted to give one last kudos and congratulations on behalf of Z Prime and ETS19. Well deserved.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.